Hey there, everyone. I'm Julie Gunlock, the director of the Center for Progress and Innovation at the Independent Women's Forum. I'll be hosting this week's pop-up podcast, and I'm really excited to be joined today by Laura Fuentes, who is a good friend of mine. We share a lot in common, and particularly the subject that we're going to be talking about today, which is school lunches, cooking for your kids, sort of the basic responsibilities of parenting and nutrition and how kids learn good habits. So Laura is the founder of Momables. She helps parents organize and develop simple, healthy meals and meal plans. She also developed something called the Family Kickstart program, which helps parents become more confident in the kitchen. That actually is a huge problem for parents. I think they feel like they need to sort of, create these massive meals or something really complicated when children really demand very simple meals. So she has this great program called the Kickstart program. I urge everyone to look into it. She also does recipe videos on her YouTube channel. Again, these are not, these are not incredibly complicated, 4-course meals. These are very approachable meals that are healthy. Kids love them, and she's also really clever in how she plates things and presents things. She's also the author of five cookbooks. I have my well dog-eared and slightly stained copy of her cookbook, The Best Homemade Kids Lunches on the Planet. My kids will confirm that. They love the meals that I make out of this cookbook. This is the coolest thing. She is a super celebrity. She's competed and won on one of the Food Network's cooking competitions. We can talk about that. She's appeared on Today, Good Morning America, many other media outlets. She is the wife and mother, I should say the most important thing, she is the wife and mother of 3 kids, or she is a wife and a mother of 3 kids. She is not mothering her husband. So they have a great media company. She and her husband work together, and they live outside of New Orleans. So Laura, it's great to have you on.
I'm so excited to be back and chat with you over a topic that you and I originally connected about. I think it was because you pointed out the name of my company, Momables, and you're like, that's so clever. And I'm like, I just want to empower parents to feed their children better, to know that they are doing a good job. And like you said in my intro, like kids really don't require that much. And so
they don't.
I think they don't. And I think we just overcomplicate. And it's a lot about is marketing and media, and everyone has access to a smartphone. So, with smart ads and everything, no matter where you fall in the income scale, you are just bombarded with this message that you should be doing more. And so it leaves a lot of parents ill-equipped, mostly mentally, and lack of confidence, whether or not they're doing a good job with their families. And so I'm really excited to talk to you about, an ongoing issue. I feel like, until there's some policy change, it will continue to be an ongoing issue in this country about who's responsible for feeding our children.
Yeah, it's really critical. I wrote a USA Today piece, and I'll get to that in a minute. But I think one thing that's really important and why I so love what you do is one thing that I write about quite often is this idea of mommy shaming. There's so much of it. And the minute I say mommy shaming, we know exactly what that is. Whether it's, you're kind of crazy. So you go through the McDonald's drive-thru and you go to a local park, and then you get a bunch of snarky you get dirty looks, or you post it on Facebook. I had actually had this happen to me years ago. And a woman was like, did you actually go to McDonald's and get them food? So we've all experienced that. And look, I understand we need to feed our kids nutritious food, but sometimes moms need a break. And one of the things that I love about Momables is that you never sort of lecture people even about like the ingredients that they use. I'm not seeing a lot of, make sure you're getting an organic chicken, or make sure you're getting this kind of, or you never tell women, like, make sure you scrutinize the labels. And so I think what you said right there is this idea that women just give up because you have to do so much to be so perfect and spend so much money. So you really avoid that, and I've always appreciated that.
Oh, well, thank you. It really is a continuous problem as we go on, because chicken is chicken. And so, or strawberries are strawberries. And the notion that there is research that a lot of parents do not give their children as much fruit as children would benefit from nutritionally because of the fear that if it's not organic, it's not good enough. And so what does that say about us as a society that, it continues to raise this thing of like, well, I'm just not doing a good enough job. And so no matter, food is a luxury. There are organic is a luxury, that not everybody needs access to or has the money to buy, but fresh food is covered. If you receive food stamps, you can buy nutritious foods with it. If you are on a tight budget, you can feed your family nutritious foods. You don't have to buy the all organic, all natural, in the pretty packaging from your health food store. You can go to the big box store and get, their brand and save money that way. The idea is to make financially smart and nutritious decisions for our families.
That's absolutely right. I'm so glad to hear you say that. And I think that needs to be like, if I had a bullhorn and could scream that at every school, at every school pickup line, and really try to reassure moms, because there is a ton of judgment out there about feeding your kids. And as you say, the result is people aren't doing it. If you look, you and I actually, we co-authored an op-ed many years ago. And the whole point of it was, look, just this school year, try to make your kids' lunches more often, right? Because if you look at the data, I think it's a third of the people a third of sort of, if you want to say, customers for the school lunch program are kids who don't qualify for reduced price and free meals, which means we're talking middle-class families are actually utilizing a program that's designed for kids who need help getting a meal. Now, that's unfortunate, and I think there's a lot of work to do to encourage people to not use these programs. These programs are bloated, they're mismanaged, and part of the reason they're bloating is you have perfectly capable people, financially capable people using these programs. I have neighbors. I live in a very nice neighborhood. People are this is a middle-class neighborhood. People can make their kids a simple meal, and they don't. And so it always shocks me when I see that. But my latest article in USA Today talks about how the school lunch program has actually become an emergency management program under the shutdowns. I'm sure, Laura, you're dealing with the shutdown. I'm sure your kid's school was shut down. And what we're seeing now is it was really shocking that in addition to this being a communicable disease problem, we were looking, at least the nation's policymakers were suddenly like, oh my gosh, are these kids going to starve? Which is the kind of horrible thing when you think about it, that if school is closed, kids starve. So, of course, schools felt compelled to continue the school lunch program despite the schools being closed. To me, that really was shocking, and it put school officials in danger. We've seen reports, I'm sure you've seen the reports, of schools having to fully close because of the cafeteria workers or the people there passing out the lunches becoming infected. And so I think it really puts school officials in danger. If we have this need, we've got to address this, and it doesn't need to be through the schools. And so in my USA Today piece, I propose, and I'd like to talk to you about it, is that we increase in an emergency, and Congress can do this. You increase SNAP, which is the new name for food stamps, and other food assistance programs, so that parents can cook their children the meal that they prefer. I'm not saying we just abandon these families who need financial help. I'm saying give it directly to the families instead of this third-person arrangement. In my community, kids are getting like cheese sandwiches and like turkey sandwiches, not hot meals, not meals that really might taste good to them or might even account for their ethnicities or the food traditions of their families. So talk to me a little bit about that, about my proposal and why you think that's a good idea. Oh, I assume you think that's a good idea.
I do believe it. I do think it's a good idea. And I know that's not why you brought me on the podcast, to reassure everyone that your idea is great, because I didn't know, I read your piece, but I am in full agreement, because I will tell you, as somebody who lives outside of New Orleans, we were not only hit, like during quarantine, we had some of the highest number of cases in the country. We also have very financially poor school districts. And we also have a lot of people who do depend on the SNAP program and the school lunches and the school lunch program at our schools. So I was able to talk to some people that their children go to public school, and I asked them about this for a different piece I was participating in, and the level. What I was sort of surprised is a few things. The level of the lack of organization parents would receive, if you're in the public school system here, your phone number is in their system. So I think it was on Mondays or Sundays, you would receive a text message with the different food pickup locations. So no matter what school you went to, Monday could be picked up in a school that's, 20 minutes away or 30 minutes away. And you would pick up food for I think it was 2 or 3 days. So you're basically given your bag. Okay. So your bag was filled with food. And so at first I was like, okay, well, that's a good idea because it's helping families whose children depend on this. We do know that there are many kids in this country that rely on breakfast and lunch. And sometimes if they stay in the after school program, they do get that afternoon snack from the school system.
Right.
So I thought, my first thought was you know what? It is nice to know that the system has not forgotten about these kids who are now at home and, they don't get meals. But then my second thought was, wait a minute. If these children are home and their parents are home, why can't we shift the dollars into probably, if these children are already in the system, the parents are in the school system, why can't we shift the money into a daily allowance for real food so that, the $10 a day that it may cost, and I'm just threw this number out there, but it could be on average less, you can buy a rotisserie chicken from the grocery store, a pound of pasta, and maybe a bushel of of bananas, and that can feed a child for a small child with $10. You can feed for 3 or 4 days nutritionally rich foods that have more nutrition than some of the things that I saw being handed out, such as if you understand how cafeteria food works, these meals are made in larger facilities in large portions. So they're not equipped to provide families with single serve, what we think of I don't know, I'm going to say the example of the lean cuisine tray, right? It's not a single serve meal. They're being given a tray of food, maybe a dozen bread rolls.
Yeah, that's largely been cooked somewhere else and it's warmed up at the schools.
Totally. So, they're getting they're maybe getting they're not even getting vegetables or anything. They were pre-made hamburgers, maybe the pizzas. Yeah. They were given where we were, there were some a bag of apples that you got to take home. So there were some things that are here and there, but the reality is that there is research that even in schools during lunchtime, because this is just mass-produced food, the quality is low, and there are many kids who literally throw out the entire tray. So there's much waste.
Also, there are things like bags of apples being so at my at our school pickup location, and I've read the announcements from my local school. And they say they send multiple sandwiches home, okay? And they may send some sundry items like apples or maybe some canned goods, although I haven't seen evidence of canned goods, but let's say that. But what if a mom doesn't like apples, okay? The point is that there's something called a grocery store, okay, where people can make choices. And what I find so insulting about this is the idea that poor people, you just give poor people what they get. And they don't have any choice in the matter. And that is insulting, it is condescending, it is paternalistic, and it is damaging also to their culture. If we are going to start appreciating cultures more, then maybe we should appreciate that in my family I grew up in the Midwest, so there's casseroles, there's a lot of grilled meats. We sometimes get into, mixing things up a bit, but there's a pretty standard, we do spaghetti and meatballs, we do a lot of stuff. And another child who maybe his family didn't grow up in the Midwest, he grew up somewhere else, and his family has different food traditions, whether he came from South America. You were born in Spain. I'm sure that you have a lot of family traditions and cooking traditions that are different from my family. Frankly, my kids would probably rather live with you. But the point is that that it is so wrong to suggest that poor people don't also deserve choices. And when we look at the research, and I've done a tremendous amount of research into childhood obesity and child health, there are only three factors that help kids stay at a healthy weight. Okay, they are putting your kids to bed at a normal hour. Okay, and I'm talking 8, 9 o'clock, 7 o'clock for younger kids, right? Or my kids stay up a little late now, but I have older kids. And limiting their screen time. These things are all very commonsensical. And the last one is eating dinner as a family 3 to 5 times a week. Okay. Yep. The point being that feeding your children from you. The American Heart Association, the Academy of Pediatrics, they all recommend cooking for your kids. This isn't just some big government's bad kind of ranting from some loony libertarian. This is the evidence from the medical community that studies child welfare and child health, saying, look, cooking is good for kids. And yet we have policies, well-meaning. I'm not saying this is some evil scheme. Well-meaning policies that actually discourage families from doing this, right? And then when it extends into like these emergency management school lunch programs, we're talking about people being in lockdown, and for better or worse, people are home. At that point, at the very least, institute some sort of emergency funding into these programs that they are already getting, into this funding that they are already getting, so that they have more choices. I think what's unfortunate is during the COVID shutdowns was the ideal time to give people more choices and the ability to decide for their families. And you didn't even see it then. You saw the exact same relying on the schools to distribute food. It's ridiculous.
Yeah, and what's interesting is that the reality is that these parents, no matter the where you fall in the financial scale, everyone has to go to the grocery store, right? Even if you rely on the school lunch program, for breakfast and snacks for your child, because you fall into a lower income, you are still going to the grocery store for milk and for bread and for rice or whatever it is that you these choices. And so when this, like you said, this would have been a perfect opportunity to shift those dollars from these programs into these families' pockets, so that they would have maybe an extra $30 a week and people are like, oh, only $30, but you can get a lot of food for $30 to feed a single child, right? Because we're only supporting the child. So it's not just the money, but
it doesn't even have to match this. It doesn't have to be a direct match. Look, we've seen money.
Right, but people always say, oh, it's going to cost, right? But if you directly match the amount, then you eliminate the argument of it's going to cost more.
You're right.
So when you eliminate that argument, what we're really talking about is eliminating the responsibility of taking care of a child that you brought into this world from a parent. And so therefore, you are letting somebody else make the decision about what's best for your child. Okay, so all things aside, parents can do this.
It is so paternalistic also to suggest it's hard. I mean, I remember in the op-ed, the joint op-ed we wrote, we were like, okay, are you actually going to insult someone by saying it's hard to slap a piece of turkey in between 2 pieces of bread and hand a kid an apple? Okay, these are not hard things, okay? And that's why, I love you as a guest, because you don't just talk about this stuff. You help parents do this. I mean, you actually are helping parents do exactly this. So I want to take a few minutes to sort of pivot a little bit away from policy, but it's still very germane to the conversation we're having. Tell us a little bit about these kits. Tell us about the philosophy of Momables, why you think this is so important, and why also, it tends to be even these other mommy bloggers and other, food people, they so easily slip into, telling people they have to have fancy ingredients, or telling them they have to do a 27-step program to make a casserole. Tell us why you have kept your philosophy so good for parents and making simple, easy to understand preparation and organizing and prep for kids.
Well, thank you. One thing I want to say is that, I wouldn't be still be standing for the last 10 years if my messaging wasn't, at the end of the day, relatable and empowering to parents, because I feel like it's like you just said, putting some turkey and cheese between two slices of bread and an apple or a banana or whatever it is that your child may eat, or maybe some veggies instead, does not make you less of a parent than someone that makes a beautifully prepared, photo-worthy lunch for a child. The idea is the effort of having the responsibility of a parent, I'm making your food, and we need to model to our children what's expected out of life. So if we want them to make a choice of eating a sandwich at the age of 18 in college and eat healthy versus junk food every day, then it all starts at home. And what I'm saying is, to focus on the things that you can do. If all you can do, because you've been trying to hold it together during quarantine by, juggling your kids and working from home, and maybe you're a single parent or your spouse is working odd hours too during this, stressful time. If all you can do is boil spaghetti, throw some spaghetti sauce on top, and maybe brown some meat or a rotisserie chicken, that's great. Okay, that is great. It's more affordable and less expensive than ordering something to be delivered to your door. So it's unfathomable to me it's not fancy enough and it doesn't look like the photos I see on the internet or what I see on television, as opposed to what is wrong, with the meat and potatoes or rotisserie chicken and some rice on the side. Like, there's plenty of nights, and I do this for a living, that my family eats a rotisserie chicken and some rice and some steamed broccoli. And that is the simplest of simplest things. And I show that on the internet to other parents to say, hey, you have permission. You have permission to make the simplest of foods. And yet at the same time, it's so, it's not about what food you feed your family, but it's about the fact that you are making that effort to show your children. It's not that complicated. Exactly. And so that is the philosophy that I've been preaching, of the responsibility of feeding a family is to the family. And until we continue to push that messaging and people actually believe it, then policy is never going to change, because people are supporting the government taking care of people as opposed to people taking care of people.
One other thing, and I want to stress this as well. I love your videos, and everyone. And at the end of this, I want everyone to hear how to find you. And I really urge people to watch Laura's videos. I really learn by watching people. Often, I love recipes. I read cookbooks back, cover to cover. But I love videos, and Laura has really good ones. But it's one thing that we haven't talked about, and just to briefly touch on, is in your videos, your kids appear sometimes, and they're so cute, and they help maybe with a little bit of the cooking, or they'll be commenting, and I think one thing that sort of the school lunch advocates never talk about is, when I cook for my kids are usually in the kitchen with me, or they're running around. They can see what I'm doing, right? And and they're curious. So my kids now each know how to fry an egg, over easy. They know how to make simple scrambled eggs and omelets. They know how to do simple things here and there with food, and they can each make a simple dinner for themselves. And I think that's so critical. I read a book, I actually reviewed a book by Julie Gunlock called How to Raise an Adult. And that's what we're really doing here. We forget that we are actually raising future adults who are going to have to take care of themselves. she was a dean of students at a university, and she noticed this downward trend in sort of the social abilities and all abilities of these kids coming into the college. That coupled with tremendous sort of depression and anxiety and other mental health disorders. And she realized that kids would come onto the campus. They didn't know how to change. They didn't know how to do their laundry. They didn't know how to cook simple meals. They were suddenly untethered from their parents with no preparation. Right. And so part of cooking with your kids, or cooking around your kids, or just cooking in general while your kids are like, I don't know, watching TV, it doesn't matter, is they see that this is something you need to do. It's a task you need to learn to do. It is a tool that will help you function in the world. So that's another important thing. It's that you're teaching people how to, by learning this and learning to make simple meals, ultimately you'll be teaching your children just by doing it.
Yes. I mean, I tell my girlfriends, I said, if your son who's 8 can read Minecraft, can play Minecraft and read what's happening in the game, they can read a simple recipe from Momables. And the reason is because I rewrite recipes to the simplest version possible and the simplest steps, because, that is, I do have a lot of parents in my community who, they subscribe to a meal plan, and then they let their kids cook one night of the week. That's another reason why I include one video a week. Every meal plan has at least one video. And that is often, I get a lot of emails from parents saying, hey, thank you, that your video recipe of the week is the one that's helping my child, they may be 8, 9, 10, and, how to cook, because they'll watch your video. Kids love YouTube. So they'll click on the recipe video, they'll watch it, they'll pause it, they chop whatever it is, and then they continue on. So it is not just, we don't need to teach our kids just textbooks skills, but life skills. And food is something that we need, right? Like, you don't need to drive a car if you live in New York City, but you do need to eat.
Right.
So so this idea is to help your kids the basics.
And as all of us have probably learned over the last couple of weeks, or rather months, my God, takeout food can be expensive. My husband and I, we limit it to once a week, because we're feeding, 3 kids, and they're all boys, and they're growing. And then, we want to get stuff too. So it's really also critical, just from a household financial standpoint. I will tell you, Laura, I should videotape at some point. I do let my kids cook, and I let them cook with me, and I let them cook their own stuff. But if I am going to eat them anything that they eat, I wish you could see the scrutiny with which I have over their hand washing beforehand. As the mother of 3 boys, I see where those hands go, and I'm really not. Basically, if I could put, if I could boil their hands before they touch the. I know that's not allowed, but there is a
from chicken. You gotta teach them the basics. Don't touch raw meat, and then go cook everybody else's food. But what you're saying is very important. It's helping your kids become adults. And isn't that at the end of the day what we want for our kids and a society, right? For people to think for themselves. And that is taught at home. And when and it comes down to just, even when, like what we really originally started talking about, which is letting the school system decide what are, these sandwiches and things that people took home. You eliminated that decision making from a parent and a child of what's best for their household. And therefore, it is a never-ending cycle. And so that is why, you work really hard on the policy side, and I work hard on the home front, right, to equip these parents with the confidence to know that, something as basic as a rotisserie chicken or ground meat or ground turkey, it can be nutritious, right? And then the how is how you fix, the know-how is how you fix the system.
Well, we also need to remember that there has never been a time in the history of the world where it is easier to prepare simple meals, and yet there has never been a time where the public is told how hard it is than today. So it is absolutely ridiculous, and I appreciate that you are trying to fix those scattered messages, because it's not true. It's very easy to do, and parents should do this. I want to take a moment just to read really quickly from your book, which again I think is the best homemade kids lunches on the planet. And it says, making lunches for your kids will love, with more than 200 deliciously nutritious meal ideas. But I want to say, look, I've seen a lot. I have a lot of kids, not a lot, but I have a few kids' cookbooks, but none are better than Laura's. She has things in here. And let me tell you, when you tell your kids that they're getting the Ninja Turtle grilled cheese or the grilled leprechaun, I've dogged with these favorites, the Skinny Elvis, the elephant sandwich. Oh my gosh, one of our favorites is the spaghetti cupcakes. Lastly, there's so more. I can't read them all, but so, I mean, that is fun for kids. But I also want to say in the back of the book, what I love is that there's actually meal planning tips 101, and she actually has simple meal plans, which actually with page numbers, and also with some suggestions. This will be good with this lunch or that lunch. It's tremendously helpful. Again, there's a reference guide. There's just so much in this book. I really recommend it. Laura, why don't you tell people all the places they can find you?
Well, the best place to find me is online. You can either Google my name, Laura Fuentes, or Momables, like Momables. And, no matter where you find me, I would be thrilled at the opportunity to teach you or your kids to follow along on video or by recipes, to develop these simple skills. What's funny, Julie, that you mentioned about my book is that was my first cookbook. And what's great is that even, I think 7 years later, my philosophy still hasn't changed. And I think what's really important is when you focus on the basics of of the basic human needs and the basic goals for people, which is to, like our kids to become adults, they can take care of themselves. You always stand in the right path. You're always on the right path. And so my cookbook that you have on your hand, which is it's a favorite, it's a great seller year after year. It's still relevant, right? Because it's not quote on trend. It is because it's what's good for normal families that want the best for their kids. And I think we all set out to be parents wanting the best for our kids. So anywhere you want to find me online, I would be thrilled, to help you like cook along with me or learn a new recipe, learn how to eliminate processed foods and sugars. Just really depends on what your meal goals are. I'm there for you.
Well, Laura's also on Twitter. Give them your Twitter. You're at Momables. Is that at Momables? And then at
Momables, at Laura S. Fuentes. Mm-hmm.
Great. And she posts daily recipes there. Sometimes I'm feeling particularly uninspired, and then I'll look at her feed and find something fun to make. Laura, look, I really appreciate you coming on here. It's so often when I interview someone, there's a lot of policy talk and not always a lot of practical talk. And this gave people both, not just,
thank you,
a snapshot of the policy and really what we're working against, a culture where it's acceptable not to feed your kids, not to prepare food for your kids, and how the federal government, state governments are really perpetuating that and encouraging that. That is a massive problem, particularly when the evidence shows that kids stay healthy when their parents are involved in their nutritional development. But I also appreciate that you are actually helping people with advice on how to actually do it. And that is a real rare treat to talk to someone who understands the policy and is actually working to solve the problem. So I'm really thrilled that you came on with us today. And I hope you'll come back.
I will. I do too. Thank you so much for having me on.
We hope you take away something new from today's conversation. And if you enjoyed this episode of She Thinks, or like the podcast in general, we'd love it if you could take a moment to leave us a rating or review on iTunes. This helps ensure our message reaches as many Americans as possible. Share this episode and let your friends know that they can find more She Thinks episodes on their favorite podcast app. From all of us here, you're in control. I think, you think, she thinks.